Greetings, dear friends! I present to your attention the most common malfunctions and breakdowns that occur on the Opel Zafira B. The suspension of Zafira B is also simple. It does not present any serious surprises. McPherson struts in front, even with regular full load and on not the best roads, withstand their 150 to 160,000 kilometers without any problems. Both the shock absorber and the support are reliable. The lever and ball sometimes serve even more, unless the stabilizer struts here are consumable with a service life of 30,000. The springs sag with runs over 200, well or with regular overloads. The rear suspension has surprisingly weak beam bushings. They work well in an empty car, but if you use it for its intended purpose, then there are chances to kill them after 50,000 mileage. The answer lies in the fact that a load of 5 adults with luggage and 2 children is almost 100 kilograms higher than the passport. An indirect sign of regular overloads is the resource of the shock absorbers and the condition of the rubber of its lower mount, but a similar effect is given by moving at high speed on dirt roads. The steering on the Zafira B is with EGUR. That is, with a conventional hydraulic rack and electric pump. There are no special problems with the rail. It serves quite a long time. If you follow the seals, unless the resource of the rods and tips on a heavy machine could be even higher. They are usually changed every 50,000, but here a lot depends on the owner. But the EGUR pump suffers greatly both from the lack of normal cooling and from a rare oil change. Nominally, it is non-replaceable, but it's worth changing it every 30 to 40,000 kilometers, especially since the operation is inexpensive. With oil, not only does the pump mechanics wear out, but the electric motor suffers, and then the keys in the control unit can burn out. If you drive for a long time with the dying EGUR pump without changing the oil, then the overheated liquid with metal chips will finish off the rail seals. To understand the scale of cost in such problems, a new pump will cost 800 to 900 euros. According to the vast majority of owners, the main problem of this generation of Zafira is that she does not have a full-fledged automatic transmission for the most popular 1.8 to 140 HP engine. Moreover, on the soft platform Astra H there is such a combination, but it's not clear why the owners of minivans were cheated. From the present, a good CV joint resource, no problems with spare parts, shafts and splines. Like other Opel cars from this period, the Zafira was not very lucky with manual transmissions. The main problem is called F70 and is on all cars with engines 1.6 and 1.8. With more powerful engines, not everything is smooth either. Supercharged gasoline 2.0 and diesel engines are also supposed to be a not very successful M32, and only rare cars with 2.2 and manual gearboxes have a quite strong F23 box for their time. This box is made on the basis of F13 box body, which was designed for very weak engines and frankly did not take out the maximum torque of the motors. A weak housing, small diameters of the output shaft and the front bearing of the output shaft of not the best quality leads to the fact that over time this very bearing dies. At the same time, it usually damages both the shaft and the gearbox housing at the same time, and where products finish off the already weak differential. But the latter can go for a walk without waiting for problems with the secondary shaft, especially for those who like to sleep in snow and mud. There is no notch for lubrication on the shaft of the satellites, and it easily grabs under extended loads. Everything is complicated by the fact that the original bearing has a very non-standard dimension of 47 x 27 x 19.5, and the nearest more or less common reliable counterparts have a dimension of 47 x 20 x 18, which requires the shaft to be resharpened to an even smaller diameter. However, in practice, this is a better option than even installing a new shaft instead of lifted and original bearing. In the original, the dimension itself dictates unsuccessful load characteristics and early failure. With the repair of this box, the situation stabilized 10 years ago, but it became difficult to find a used one in good condition. The craftsmen have adjusted the shaft to a smaller diameter of the installation of a repair sleeve. Repair with the replacement of the secondary shaft is also common, but the price of the shaft alone starts from €300. It turns out not very budgetary and, moreover, not particularly reliable. To all the design problems, the quality of the work of the garage craftsman is added. The possible development of a seat in the housing and the misalignment of the shaft due to inaccurate broaching of the housing. When buying a car with a manual gearbox or a robot, you should carefully listen to the box on the lift, having previously unrolled it with the motor and then drowned it out. Even at the initial stage of problems, in this case the sound of a dying bearing is heard well, much better than on a test drive. Well, in operation you should not overload the box with abrupt starts and stops, and again, change the oil more often. The M32 box produced by gearbox, which can be found not only in Opel but also on Fiat with the Alfa Romeo, is also not an example of reliability. And the reasons the problems are similar: a bad bearing and its lubrication. The box has been modernized all the years of production of the Zafira B, and there are many options. Only the last one is problem-free, where the protrusions of the channels for lubrication are visible on the back cover of the box. With such a cover there is a 62 mm output shaft bearing and a thick output shaft. Until 2009, they put a box with a thin shaft and a 55 mm bearing, and such boxes sold even less than the F17. While spare parts for the M32 are more expensive, intermediate options are not particularly interesting, but they were too. Only the fully upgraded version is truly reliable, but if you still decide to take a car with an earlier version, then again, you need not to overload the car and fill in twice as much oil as it should be according to the manual. Modifications with the gearbox have a 2-mass flywheel, expensive and not very reliable. But there is good news. Unlike the younger box, in the case of M32 there are still enough used options from showdowns. Reliable manual gearboxes went only to the 2.2 gasoline engine. With it, there is an old strong gearbox F23 and the most powerful diesel engine 1.9i, with which the Opel box of the F40 series works. To be fair, the F23 also has bearing problems, but rarely. Mostly complaints are related to the operation of the wings and the gear selection mechanism. The bearings of the F40 are very good, and only the rocker end, like on the M32, a dual-mass flywheel bring it. This is a 4-speed gearbox from the old guard. It is electronically controlled, but in fact it differs little from the progenitor with hydraulic vacuum control, the so-called governor. There are no linear solenoids or active pressure regulation, very conservative algorithm for blocking gas turbine engines, very slow oil pollution, and a conservative cooling system with a heat exchanger in the main radiator. As a result, this box turned out to be very tenacious. If the oil is changed regularly, at least once every 60 to 80,000, then it will probably last longer than the engine and the car itself. There are quiet live on units with runs over 400,000 kilometers. Asian's main enemies are heat exchanger leaks, when antifreeze gets into ATP and overloads with overheating of the oil. In this case, the clutches of the drive or reverse and direct package suffer. The last package is still severely killed if auto neutral is turned on, turning on neutral while the car is stationary. But even dealers turn off these options, since frequent on-off switching led to problems with the box even during the warranty period. Simple overloading leads to wear of the rear caliper and seals on the drive or reverse clutch. As a result, the gearbox loses its reverse gear. There are also cases of cracks in the case and pressure leaks in the same drum, but the result is the same: lack of pressure, loss of the rear one, garbage in the box, and capital light, replacing a burn-out bag. Filter: it is internal here and changes only when the box is half, as well as the rings on the caliper or the caliper itself. The repair is very cheap, it costs 200 to 400 euros. By the standards of modern prices for automatic transmission repair, this is a penny. And after it, the box goes well further. With around under half a million, the planetary gear can already make noise, but it can do this for a long time. In general, this is a reliable and foolproof automatic transmission, which is now a rarity. Only the fuel consumption of cars with this automatic transmission is not happy. On the highway it is quite acceptable, about 7 to 8 liters, but in urban conditions it easily goes for 16 liters per 100, on cars with 1.9 turbo diesel 150 HP. Put a 6-speed Aisin TF80SC, this is a much more modern box. By modern standards it is quite reliable, but the cooling system with the heat exchanger eventually leads to the overheating, and the box is also very sensitive to the purity of the oil. Humane vulnerability is the valve body. The oil becomes contaminant due to the intensive work of the blocking system of the gas turbine engine, especially when it operates in a sliding mode at high loads. Another specific problem of the box is the wear of the C1 drum shaft O-rings, through which oil is supplied to several units at once. Overheating finishes the rubber pistons in the box, accelerates the wear of the O-ring shaft seals, and as a result, pressure leaks along the mechanical part are added to the expensive repairs already with run slightly over 200. And if the oil is not changed, then the bulkhead of the TF80SC mechanical part is not very difficult, but the spare parts are expensive. And the saddest thing is that the valve body requires a very thorough check at the stand, because there are a lot of linear solenoids in it and they are officially non-replaceable. There are only a few stands even in Moscow, and there are practically none outside the capital. And due to the complexity of the design and the sensitivity of the valve body setting, even this does not guarantee protection against incorrect operation in the future. New valve bodies are not cheap, but while they can still be bought, since JLR offers relatively inexpensive valve bodies for the LR Freelander 2, there is a difference only in the operating mode of one of the solenoids, otherwise they are equivalent. And the conversation is simple. Comparison with Easytronic. A simple robot based on the F17 manual gearbox has become the main type of automated transmission on the Opel Zafira B. The main problem is not even reliability, but the quality of the unit's operation. Considering the absence of an anti-rollback system in the ABS and an electric handbrake drive, the operation of such a car is inhilitarian, turns into torture for the driver and the clutch. The quality of gear shifting is satisfactory only with a very calm driving style. It is highly not recommended to nimble. The car will get entangled in gears, will switch with blows and at the wrong time. The manual mode saves a little, but the switches in it are very extended. In general, driving a car with a robot is possible, but not very pleasant. But there are situations when design flaws can lead to an accident. For example, when driving in a traffic jam in a dense traffic uphill, the car slowly increases the rollback back and then just gets up. Overheating clutch. With reliability, everything is also not very good, largely due to the flimsy donor. However, the clutch and shift drive mechanisms also do not have a very high resource. More often, the clutch drive electric motor or control unit supplies. The tight arrangement of the units under the hood of Zafira makes it difficult to maintain, and the temperatures are higher than those of conventional cars. As a result, the service life of plastic and rubber elements, all other things being equal, is lower. And the brains of gasoline engines also suffer greatly. On the Zafira they fail significantly more often than on the Vectra and Astra, and the wiring becomes fragile by 8 years of operation. Another common misfortune is the branded oils of the DXOS2 family. They burn out very badly, coke, and are prone to oil plague. And with a replacement interval of every 15,000, the motor is quickly killed. The bulk of the cars are equipped with 1.6 and 1.8 liter engines from the third generation GM Family 1 line. These are very conservative motors, dating back to 82 in design. Cast iron block, aluminum 16-valve cylinder head, timing belt drive, there is a phase regulator or two, but not hydraulic compensators, a conventional pump controlled by a thermostat, and there is a water oil heat exchanger. For all the simplicity of the design, it has drawbacks. Basically, the complaints are associated with the high operating temperature of these motors and the low resource of the thermostat seals and, more unpleasantly, the mentioned water oil heat exchanger. The latter is located under the exhaust manifold and, in addition to internal heating, is also heated outside. The seals do not withstand, the original ones flow already by the third or fifth year of operation, and the non-original ones are changed at all once a year. In such conditions, only seals made of Leroy-Staumer or PTFE can work, and ordinary grades of MPS rubber at temperatures of 100 degrees and more literally dissolve in oil. As a result, some owners simply weld the heat exchanger, since it serves mainly to heat the oil and not to cool it. And as a result of such a radical intervention, the oil does not overheat in normal operating modes. Failures in the operation of phase regulators due to contamination of the valve grids and the wear of the valves themselves. And then the phase regulators is also a frequent phenomenon. And now we have accumulated experience in diagnosing and repairing such problems. And operations on every 1520 to 15 increments of stands on every 15, 12 to 15. That often results in a major overhaul with runs of 200 to 250,000. It is quite simple to make motors of this series much more reliable. Cold thermostat at 86 to 92 degrees and early switching of the fans, and there will be no frequent problems with the rubber bands. Leaks of the cooling system, heat exchanger, and the dynamics will increase. But most of the cars are sold in very cheap services. There is no questions of modifications. The chances are higher that the motor will be finished off by installing an outright china and handlessness. When buying, first of all, it is worth evaluating not even the weak points of the motors, but the quality of service in general. 2.2Z22YH, not the worst engine, especially since the cost of its operation has been falling lately due to the lower prices for timing components and fuel equipment. The body of the car is completely galvanized. As usual with Opel, most of the panels are galvanized on the one side, but its layer is quite thick. True, unlike the French, here metal with double-sided galvanization is used for the panels of the front fenders, so that from the inside they rust no more than the outside. The main is the tendency to peeling off the paintwork due to the problem of oxidation of galvanized steel under the paint layer. The layer, however, is quite thick, and there is almost no anti-gravel, so the average Zafira B looks significantly better than the Octavia A5. All other things being equal, but there are many chips, and all of them must be tinted. The main places where visible corrosion appears on the body are the front edge of the hood, the edge of the roof, sandblasting zones on the seals, arcs, door bottoms, door handle areas, and moldings, as well as the lower part of the tailgate from the hood and below. Nothing unusual. Surface rust climbs slowly until it goes deep into the seam, and there are a lot of such places. At the edge of the roof, there is the joint with the glass and the longitudinal joints of the roof itself. On the hood, this is the joint between the frame and the panel. Well, the seam of the rear body arc was made in the classic Opel way, by rolling with an inner arc, and even the shelf was left by the designers to collect more dirt and moisture. Since we have touched upon the issue of moisture, let us recall the rusting joint of the front wing and the seal. There is a mud pocket inside, and the wing mount serves as a corrosion catalyst, especially if there is a mud guard. From the same series, an unsuccessful joint between the front arc, locker, and the wing. It collects dirt at the edge, causing increased corrosion of the arc and corrosion along the door frame at the moldings. The optics are rather weak. The headlight housings are heavily worn out, and in cars with xenon, the headlight reflectors actively burn out and the correctors and body level sensors fail. The headlight washer nozzle caps do not hold very well. They can fly out at high speed. Most of all, the breakdown of the door locks is disturbing. The micro switches and the motors themselves fail. This is especially unpleasant when the tailgate lock or the rear door wiper motor is out of order. The trapezoid of front wipers does not often turn sour, but this also happens. The folding mechanisms of the mirrors fail due to acidification of the aluminum base and damage to the gearbox. Successful salon at Zafira B is one of the main advantages. It looks good, despite the simplicity and low cost of the materials used, and it holds up well. It is a pity that the upholstery of the fabric seats is very easily soiled. The leatherette inserts on them are strongly wiped off, and the steering wheel peels off quite early. Often after 100 runs, the loss of texture and wear is clearly visible. The rest of the breakdowns are usually mechanical, they are associated with inaccurate use, poor fastening of loads, etc. Displays and dashboard breakdowns do occur, but are rare in this generation, and on cars after 2007 they are virtually non-existent. The main complaints about small things like not very successful attachments of visors, backlash of the handles and the operation of the climate control panel. Your handles are malfunctioning, sometimes the control unit fails. All this is being repaired, but there is also a chance that you will have to change the block assembly. Even in the climate, many note a noisy and low resource fan motor. It sometimes gets up with runs up to 100 and with runs over 200. It has almost certainly already changed or repaired. The air conditioner is strong enough. From the problems one can recall the corrosion of the pipes and the soaring of the fasteners. The compressor, clutch, condenser and evaporator are quite successful here, except that the wiring to both pressure sensors of the air conditioner and to the switching clutch rods at the connectors and the condenser does not like sand, dirt and aggressive chemicals. It easily loses honeycombs in the lower part, and it clogs up quickly, requiring carefully flushing before the start of the season. The electrics of the car, as already mentioned, are relatively advanced, with multiplex buses and an intelligent control unit for the onboard network. On cars before 2009, the main expensive problem was the failure of the CIM unit, which is responsible for the driver interface and display. Now CIM blocks have learned to restore, change, flash from more recent versions. The cost of repairs has drastically decreased from 100 plus thousand rubles to 5 to 10 rubles for the restoration of the unit or the installation of a replacement one, and the problem has gone from the category of acute. But you should be careful. If the block is of the old model, then there are still chances that the keys will untie. The car will not start, the light will not work, the dashboard will fail. But wiring breakdowns in the corrugations of the doors and the engine compartment have become widespread over time. Also, with the growth of mileage, problems with generators have become more frequent. They also have an overrunning clutch that is not reliable, and the brush assembly often wears out early due to dirt in the engine compartment. Unfortunately, the likelihood of failure of the engine control units remains. Until 2007, it stood on the cylinder head bracket, then it was moved, reducing the temperature and vibration load, but it still remained under the hood, and the temperature effect remains. On this, information about the problems of the Opel Zafira B is exhausted. If you know more, or do not agree with what you heard, I'm waiting for you in the comments. Comment.